In the time it took me to film this, it actually started getting dark outside, so you know this took a long time. Hello and welcome, or welcome back if you are new here. Today we have another sit down, another little bookish video. I mean, what else do we do here? No surprise there. But I thought today, seeing as we're reaching the end of bookmas and the end of the year, I thought that maybe I would do a little 25 of 2025. So basically I've seen people do this about 24 of 24, 23 of 23, where basically you talk about your top, in this year, 25 books of the year 2025. And so this was actually kind of hard for me to choose these 25 books. I think choosing the first 15 was easy because, well, I had 11 5-star reads this year, which isn't bad, almost one for every month, and the year isn't over. Who knows, maybe in December I'll have my 12th and I'll round up the year perfectly. And then I had a couple other books that were just, I really liked during the year, and then choosing like the last probably 6-7 books was quite hard, just because there were a lot of books that I felt mid about. I was kind of like, these were just books that I enjoyed but nothing deeper. I only read about 70 to 75 books this year, so 25, that's like a third of that. That's a third of what I read all year. Also, I didn't want to include like the entire series, so I tried to limit it to one book per series. But without further ado, grab yourself a nice cold or warm drink, depending on your preference, and let's get on into the video. First off, I'm going to talk about my 5-star reads of the year. So there were 11 of those. I'm very happy about that. It was a good reading year. And then I will talk about the other 16 books with no particular order, so that it won't be like 5-star, 4-star, 3-star. The rest of them will be random. So I do want to try and be chronological with this though. So let me pull up Fable so I know what I read first. Okay, so my first 5-star of the year, and honestly, maybe the first book I read the year. It's the first one on my Fable, but I know at the beginning of the year I didn't write down like what days I read books. Then I went back, I think in February, and added them after. So this might not be the first book I read the year, but it might be. And that is The Girl in Question by Tess Sharp. So this is the second in, I guess it's a duology, but to be fair, when the first one was written I had no idea there was going to be a second book, and then there was, so who knows, maybe we'll get more than 2. The first book is The Girls I've Been. Basically, book 1, we follow Nora, and we have a kind of past and present timeline. So the present, she is in the middle of a bank heist. Someone is robbing the bank, and she just happens to be on a hostage taken, so she has to figure out how to get out of that. And then when we go into the past, we discover that she was actually, it's all connected, she's somehow connected to the people in the bank heist, because she was the stepdaughter to a very bad person. But she wasn't even a stepdaughter. Basically her mum was a con artist, and so she'd find rich men, give Nora an alias, and then trick them into giving her money and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, her mother fell for the wrong person, who was this very bad person who then is connected to the bank robbery. So this book was honestly just so good, and I also loved the first book. It's just, when I read the first book, it was very different to a lot of the books I read, because it was before I really branched out from fantasy, so I was only really a fantasy reader. Since I've read a bit more, so this book wasn't as new, but I just really liked the first book. I very much enjoyed the past present timeline, because where you'd find things out in perfect timing for the story. It was honestly, I just really liked this book, and I was so happy when I discovered that there was a second one. And the second one's even better, and you get more lore and you get new characters, and honestly this is just a really good book. Next off, my second 5-star of the year was Onyx Storm. So this was only released at the beginning of this year. I think it came out the 21st or the 22nd of January. One of the two. As you can see, it's tabbed. It was the first book that I ever annotated, so the first book that I ever tabbed, and I was very happy about that. This book was so good. I know a lot of people think the 4th book, like, prefer the 4th book, and the 2nd book even less, and the 3rd book less as well. For me, it was the other way around. 4th book was 4 stars, 2nd book was 4.5 stars, and this book was a 5-star read. So for me, they just got better and better. I don't know, I just really like this one. So I can't really talk about this one, and I think everyone knows what Fourth Wing is. Basically, it's a dragon war academy, and we follow Violet, Sorengale, and Zayden Ryerson, and that's all I'm going to say really. You don't need to know anything more, just read these books. The third one, I loved it so much. I loved that we expanded on the world building, that we got to meet new characters. I loved the storyline. I can't spoil, obviously. I absolutely love this book, and the cliffhanger at the end is actually should be illegal. I cannot wait for book 4, and there is no date yet. Next up, we have our third 5-star of the year, and that is Lightbringer by Claire Legrand. So this is again the third book in a trilogy, so I can't really talk much about what happens in the plot of this one, but in book one basically we follow Eliana and Riel, who are 1,000 years apart. So Riel is 1,000 years before Eliana, who's then 1,000 years later, if that makes sense. And so first off, just that was really interesting. So you got to see two different timelines, two different worlds. But also, well, throughout the course of the story, you find out how Riel and Eliana are actually more connected than you might think, considering there's 1,000 years different. But honestly, this trilogy surprised me in the best way possible. The ending was so beautiful and so sad. I feel like it managed to add a new twist to your typical high fantasy trilogy, and so I did really enjoy that. But yeah, this was just honestly the perfect conclusion, and while there were like plot points I didn't like, it worked in the story. Next off, and this one was only a couple books after Lightbringer, so February was a good reading month, as it always is. That is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. But this was the first R.F. Kuang book that I read, and I really, really enjoyed it. Basically, we follow June Hayward, who is a failing writer and who's friends with Athena Liu, a much more successful writer, and she witnesses Athena Liu's death, and she steals her manuscript and then publishes it under her name, which then makes her really famous, and it kind of follows how that spins and gets out of hand. I think it's so clever how she manages to make our main character both someone that you hate because you recognise they're a bad person, but you're also unwillingly rooting for her because she is the main character. I don't know how to describe it. It was a crazy book. It was a crazy feeling. I just thought this book was so good, and it was very much unlike the sort of book I usually read. It was just honestly, it blew my mind. Next off, we have one that I don't have in physical, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This book honestly is up there for my all-time favourite book that I read this year. It was just everything you'd want in a book. It made me cry, it made me laugh. I was so deeply invested in the characters. It was amazing. Basically, it follows our main character as she interviews Evelyn Hugo, who is recounting the story of her past, told through the time periods of her 7 husbands. So it's like 7 sections of her past split into her husbands. If you like stories about Hollywood, that is definitely one to give a read. So that book, honestly, I loved it. Next off, we have the justly famous Binding 13 Boys of Tommen. As you can see, it's been heavily annotated. I read this so quickly, and then I immediately went out and bought the whole rest of the series, and I did not regret it because I read all of them immediately and I loved them. I love this world. I love these characters. They are my babies. I cannot wait for the next Boys of Tommen book because like my mind is still here. So I did love the rest of the Boys of Tommen. None of them were 5-star like Binding 13. I feel like it just started off so strong. I'm definitely a Johnny and Shannon girl. But basically in this we follow Johnny Kavanagh, who is captain of the rugby team, and Shannon, who is basically, she gets bullied a lot in her school, so her parents enroll her in a private school, which is where Johnny is captain of the rugby team, and it kind of follows what happens. They meet, they fall in love. But do not think that this is an easy breezy romance. It is not. This is deeply traumatic, and you should definitely check your trigger warnings because it talks about domestic abuse. It is very traumatic. It is hard to read at times, and I did weep at the end. Like just the last 20 pages, I was just in tears, just pure on sobbing. Next up, we have Heir of Fire, my personal favourite of the Throne of Glass series. I just thought this one was honestly just perfect. I have no complaints, I have no words. I thought it dealt with everyone's mental situation especially. I thought it was more of a chill book, a bit more character driven and less plot driven, and I really, really liked that. Of course, we also meet Rowan in this book, which I didn't hate. This is the third book in the Throne of Glass series. In the first book, we follow Selena, who is a prisoner, and she gets chosen by the prince to become a candidate in a trial. So basically his knight, if you will. And she used to be an assassin, and now she isn't. And then we just like followed this over 8 books. This book was just, honestly, I loved it. I thought it was the perfect third book. Can't believe it was only the third book, but this one was my all-time favourite. I like when you have a long, high-stakes fantasy book that takes a book to kind of really work on the characters and really make you fall in love with them, and that is what this book did, and it did it so, so well. Next up, we have technically a reread, but I still did read it this year, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue. And let me just take a second to show off. My lovely little special edition cover says History Heart at the front. Bet we could make some. Those who know. So this was technically a reread, so like I knew it was going to be a 5-star read, but you know how sometimes you book a rating and then you think back on it and you're like, I rated it too high in the moment. This was not the case. I reread it and the second time was as much of a 5-star read as the first time. This book, when I first read it, I stayed up till 3 in the morning. I cried after, and it's not even a sad book. It just made me so emotional that I cried. I do not know why this book had such a huge impact on me, but it genuinely did. This book, I have no words. It is my favourite book of all time. We follow Henry, who is a prince of the United Kingdom, and Alex, who is the son of the President of the United States. They don't like each other at first, and then they have to spend time with each other, and they fall in love. That might sound cheesy, but it is beautiful. This book is my comfort read, and honestly, I can't really say much else about this book other than I love it. Okay, we somehow skipped a 5-star read. I missed it. It should have come before Binding 13. So then the next book is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So this is the prequel to the Hunger Games, the first prequel. So you have the original Hunger Games. This book is set 50 years before. It was honestly my favourite in the entire series. So in this one we follow President Snow when he is younger, and the 10th Hunger Games we follow the victor Lucy Gray. So this one does take place more outside the games compared to the first Hunger Games book. So the games are only maybe the first half, and then the second half is about how Snow gets sent to be a peacekeeper in District 12, and we find out about that. This book was just insane. I think it was so well written in that you know that Snow is a horrible person because, well, you know about him in the Hunger Games, and yet you still go into this and find yourself charmed by him at times. So I watched the movie first before reading this book, and I was worried that the movie was gonna be like a white man apologist movie. Kind of like how the last Star Wars movie was with Kylo Ren, who is an asshole who killed Han Solo, his father, who treated him with nothing but love. Like, that kid had no troubled past. Nothing but love. And he killed his father, and then at the end you're like, oh, but Rey, I actually loved you. And no, I hate Kylo Ren. But anyway, this managed to avoid doing that, which I was so happy about because I hate white male apologist stuff. It's actually insane, and there are lines in it you kind of realise at first he does a better job of hiding how messed up he is, and then as the book goes on you realise that he's actually like, he's not a good person and he's just really good at hiding it. It was just a really, really good book and my personal favourite in the Hunger Games. Next up we have the only non-fiction book on this list, and that is Friends, Lovers and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. So this is Matthew Perry's autobiography that he wrote before he died, and it basically details his childhood, growing up, how he became famous, how he got on Friends, but most importantly his struggle with addiction to drugs and alcohol. I just found this fascinating. I also obviously love the TV show, and Chandler is my favourite character. Chandler and Rachel are my two favourites. Because he wrote this when he's still alive, so at the end there's a part where he's like, I'm now sober, I want to one day start a family, have kids, fall in love, and then you read this after he's dead and has been able to do none of those things. It was actually like the last chapter, I had to like stop a few times. The last chapter, just because it was making me really emotional and really sad, and I was reading in public, so I don't want to cry in public. So I had to literally just close it, breathe, be like, it's okay, and then open it back up. This is honestly a really well written book, I feel, because you wouldn't necessarily expect a comedy actor to write a good book, but he really does. And because it's not a fictional book, it's about a real person, so it's real things that happened, it hits a lot harder than if been the same in fictional. Reading it a year or so after his death made it even worse, because this is a very hopeful book at the end. It talks about him getting through his struggles with addiction, so by the end he's sober, he's trying to move on to better things, and that's how he had like the presence of mind to write this book. And reading it after he died of a drug overdose is actually traumatic. Really sad, but really nice. And then my most recent 5-star read is The School for Good and Evil, and yes, that is technically a kid's book. Like, not kids, it's probably like a 10 to 13 book, but basically I had a craving to reread that series last month in October, and so I was like, I'm not getting any younger, I'm probably very soon out of the window where I would enjoy the series because it's not made for people my age. And I reread all 6 books and then the 2 prequel books that have been published since, which I hadn't read before. I loved it just as much as the first time. It may be a kid's book, but I feel it's just written in a way that you can enjoy it as a slightly older person, so a 20-year-old in my case. The first book for me is perfection. The other book's also really good, but the first book really, it was so good. Basically, it follows Agatha and Sophie as they get kidnapped to be taken to the School for Good and Evil, which is basically where like fairy tale people get trained to be fairy tale people. So you're either in the School for Good, so like Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, you know, the good guys, or you're in the School for Evil, so like, I don't know, Maleficent, or like the Old Witch. And it follows them as they get kidnapped. So you think at the beginning that Agatha's going to be evil and Sophie's going to be good, but it's actually the other way around. They get sent to different schools, and so it follows them trying to figure out how to switch back and then realizing they're actually in the right place, and it's really good. And then there are 5 other books all set in the same world with the same characters, and I just really love that series, and it kind of brought me back to my youth, and it was a really fun time. And then the last 5-star we have today, but not the 25th book, this is only the 11th book, is Babel by R.F. Kuang. Again, she is the only person who's made a 2-time appearance on this list. So I read Babel over the summer. Just like Yellowface, it blew me away. It was really good. This one is heavier than Yellowface. It deals with colonialism from the British Empire. It deals with belonging in your country. It's set in the 1930s, I believe. Sorry, the 1830s, maybe the 1840s. And it deals with kind of the more subtle ways that colonialism is part of society. So not just the typical, they landed on the land, they took over the land, they took the stuff. The insidiousness of it. It was really interesting, and it is partially historical, as in it is a fictional book because there's magic in it, but obviously the British did colonialize a lot of countries, and so those aspects are true. So I'd say it's like a historically based fantasy, if that makes sense. But basically we follow Robin Swift, who is a Chinese, not immigrant, he was orphaned in China, and then this rich professor came and was like, you're gonna be my son now. And so he enrolled him in Babel, which is the Oxford University of Languages, because basically languages make the world go round. You write down on little silver bars like stuff in 2 different languages, and it has magic power. It's a really bad explanation of what's a really interesting book. The ending of this one was really hard, but it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. This book had so many twists and turns in it. You would not start it and be like, yeah, this is where it's gonna end. R.F. Kuang is such an amazing author, I feel. I think she really manages to not only create investing stories with investing characters, but she also manages to have some kind of social commentary on the side. But no, I really enjoyed this book. Okay, so now we are moving on to the other 25 books. Not other 25, I think there are 16 left. So first off, we're going to do the couple of Kindle books that are on here, and then we're going to move on to the physical books. So the first one is One Day by David Nichols. So you may have heard of One Day because they made a series, I believe it was last year or maybe the year before, and that's how I discovered One Day, because basically my family watched it without me. I'd seen some trailers and had no interest. It wasn't the sort of TV show I normally watch, but my family watched it, and they watched it, and they said that the last episode was so sad that my dad cried, and my dad doesn't cry. So I was like, okay, now I have to see it. They wouldn't tell me what was happening. They were like, no, you have to watch it. And so I did watch it, and honestly, the last 2 episodes were amazing. 5 stars, perfect. Tears for a good half hour afterwards. It was traumatizing, but it was so good. But the rest of it, I just found that it was a bit bland. So the series wasn't for me, but the book I feel was a lot better. But I read the book this summer, and again, tears. It follows Em and Dex over a period of, I think, about 20 years, and it only follows them on one day of each year, so July 15th. So when they meet on July 15th to 20 years later, where they are then. And it's kind of a wrong person, right time, no, right person, wrong time situation. So basically just every year we catch up with them, and sometimes they're together, sometimes they're apart, sometimes they're with other people. You get the gist. The only thing that stopped this book from being a 5-star, because honestly it was so close, was the ending. So I'm not going to spoil, but basically in the ending, I preferred the TV show ending to the book ending. They just changed a little detail, and I personally prefer it. It was amazing. It was so sad. I genuinely, that TV show destroyed me so wholeheartedly that Netflix on One Day, which is the 15th of July, so the 15th of July last year, which was the year that I watched the show, I cried just because Netflix posted a reel about One Day, and that made me cry. So just so you know, and the book is the same, honestly. The book is But I would recommend both series and book. But no, One Day, if you want a book that's just going to make you cry at the end, then One Day is it. Next up we have The Secret Commonwealth. So this was a recent read. It is the second book in the Book of Dust trilogy by Philip Pullman, and it was just as good the second time as it was the first time. But basically the Book of Dust, I'm not going to talk too much about because you need to read the original trilogy, I feel, first. But it follows Lyra and Malcolm, our two main characters. So in the first book, La Belle Sauvage, it's more Malcolm who's the main character because it's when Lyra's a baby. But then in the second book we jump ahead 20-25 years when Lyra's a bit older, and then we follow how the two of them meet again. It was a good read. It was a reread for a reason, and I think it was a perfect middle book in that it was a perfect connector between book 1 and book 2, especially because it had to deal with the 20-year time jump between book 1 and book 2. I felt it handled it perfectly. Okay, so the next books that we have, I'm going to try and pull them up in alphabetical order. Not alphabetical order, sorry, chronological order of which I've read them. Okay, so first off we have a book that I feel like I'm talking about in every single video I make, but it was a really impactful book of this year, and that is obviously Fourth Wing. I know I said I was going to try and not do too many series, but I had to include Fourth Wing. It was out of my hands, guys. Fourth Wing is the first book in the Emperine series, which currently has 3 released and is planned on being 5. I mentioned earlier obviously the plot in Onyx Storm, so I don't need to talk too long about this. Basically this book was the book that got me back into reading, and so I will forever be grateful to that book and that feeling because it kind of reignited the inner reader. Next up we have Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. I rated this book a 4.5, so you know it was good, and honestly I just think Alex E. Harrow's writing is really unique, and her books aren't really long. They're probably your generic 350-400 pages, and yet she somehow finds a way to get you so invested in the characters that you can't put them down. So this one follows Opal, who's a high school dropout and who takes care of her younger brother, and she basically gets a job at Starling House as its caretaker, and she discovers that there's more to Starling House than meets the eye. This is, I'd say, a casual fantasy. I feel like that's a good term. So it's set in the real world, but there are fantasy elements, but not an urban fantasy. I wouldn't really say that. It's not in a city. It was just really good. Like all of Alex E. Harrow's book, there is also social commentary in there, like R.F. Kuang. And so Alex E. Harrow used to be a historian, and I feel like that shows because either her books are set back in time or they're set in the modern day, but there is a big link to history, and I just find that fascinating because I love history. I find it so interesting, and so I feel like you can really tell that she 100% does her research.
I'm not a psychopath, Anderson. I'm a high-functioning sociopath. Do your research.
And I think that's just lovely to read a book that clearly had so much time and effort put into it. Next off we have Any Way the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell. So I would have preferred to put the first book, but I read that in December last year, so it doesn't count. But basically I purely picked up this first book because it was described to me as what if Drarry was real? So Drarry is Draco and Harry, and while that is not a ship that I ship in real life, I really like the idea of it. So we have Simon, who is the chosen one and who is at a magic boarding school, and then we have Baz, who is kind of from a rich family and who's his enemy, and then they do end up getting together. So in that aspect it is definitely very Harry Potter coded. However, I will say for the first book, knowing it was Harry Potter coded spoiled the ending reveal to me because of certain opinions I have about Harry Potter, which then led me to make those deductions in the first book. But that's purely me. Other people could know it's a Harry Potter thing and not have those opinions, and so therefore not get spoiled. But this is the third and final book in the trilogy. I gave you the plot of the first book, and then the second book kind of is the question of what happens after the chosen one defeats the villain he was like chosen to defeat, and so that was really interesting. And then this third book is kind of a conclusion, and I just really like this book. I gave it, how much did I give it? I gave it a 4 stars, but I just feel like this series was just kind of a silly fun time, and it kind of did scratch that Harry Potter itch, but like Harry Potter if J.K. Rowling was progressive. Next up we have another book that is technically in the same series but moving past it, and that is Sunrise on the Reaping. So this is the second prequel in the Hunger Games series, and it's set 25 years before the original series, and it follows Hamish Abernathy, who was their mentor in the original trilogy, so it follows his games. They recently just released the trailer for the movie that's coming out next year, and literally just from the teaser trailer I was feeling so many emotions. I was almost crying. This book is not for the faint-hearted. Like every Suzanne Collins book, I feel it's very sad. It's a very important commentary on our capitalist society. This one, I'd say the commentary is on propaganda, and I just The back quote, let me read it. When you've been set up to lose everything you love, what is there left to fight for? I mean, come on, you can't read that and think this is gonna be a happy book. This is not a happy book. It was honestly one of my favorites. I love Haymitch and I couldn't wait for his game. But yeah, I really like this. I gave it 4.5 stars. It just... bring tissues. Next up we have, yes, you guessed it, another book in a series, and that is Taming 7. So I've actually found out that this is kind of people's least favourite in the Boys of Tommen series, which is crazy because it was my second favourite. I really like this one. From book 1, I had been waiting for Claire and Gibbs's stories, and it did not disappoint. I really liked this one. This was a 4.5 read for me. I really loved it. Gibbsy is my baby. I love him so much. He's the type of character that I love, you know, the funny best friend who's actually got like hidden layers. I love that. And obviously it was traumatizing. I mean, it's a Chloe Walsh book. They're always gonna be traumatizing. I thought it was just really well done in that it was more subtle than the others. Like the others, you know it's gonna be traumatizing from the beginning, and you did know this was gonna be traumatizing, but I thought they did a good job of, because Gibbsy was hiding his trauma, so the book also hid his trauma, if that makes sense. Like the plot and then the reader experience are very closely linked, and I love when a book does that. I ate it up and obviously cried at the end. I cried at the end of all of these books. Next off we have the last book that's also part of a series, and that is Queen of Shadows. So Queen of Shadows was my second favourite book in the Throne of Glass series. This was a 4.75 stars. It was so close to 5 stars. It just didn't give me that 5-star feeling. So it wasn't a 5 stars, but it was so close. This one is obviously right after Heir of Fire. I think is the perfect switching book. I can't say what because that'd be huge spoilers, but I just, again, really like this one, and I really just like Selena's personality. I feel like this really sums it up. This sentence here: her destiny awaits, but first vengeance. And I really love that about this book. It was kind of like a pause. I felt like Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadows were kind of like breathers, because when you have an 8 series book, you need breather books, because otherwise it's a lot to get through, especially if it's high fantasy. And so I felt like these 2 books were the perfect middle book break that was still very much part of the plot and very important and very addictive. You weren't bored, but they just felt a bit more laid back, and I really enjoyed them. Coming up to the last few now, but next off we have Happy Place. Again, I feel like I just discussed Happy Place in a previous video, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. Basically, we follow Harriet and Wynne, who used to be together, and they go on holiday with their friends, and they have broken up, but they don't tell their friends that, so they pretend to be together. I really enjoyed this book. It was my second Emily Henry book. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I do, however, because I had expectations that the end was going to go a certain way based off of my own misinterpretation, I was disappointed because I personally thought that the ending that I thought was going to happen would have been better, but that's just me. It was still a really good book. It's just, it is a happy place, you know? You're in this friend group who've known each other for ages, and I don't know, I just thought it was a really good book. As someone who doesn't read a lot of typical romance, especially more adult romance books, it was kind of a breath of fresh air. Perfect summary. Like, of course I read this in summer. Look at the cover. I'm just a girl, you know? It was honestly just a perfect, easy, happy, light summer read. And next up we have Loveless by Alice Oseman. So this is actually the only Alice Oseman book that I've read this year, and so in this one we follow Georgia, who goes off to university, and basically at university discovers that she is asexual and kind of realizes that there's like a whole queer community out there that's more than just gay and lesbian. And I don't know, much like all Alice Oseman books, she managed to create a perfect friend group. I feel like what Alice Oseman really gets right is just an amazing top tier friend group that you're jealous you're not part of. I really like this one, and I think it's a really important book because in this society we're very focused about like, you're gonna get older, you're gonna fall in love with someone, get married and have children. And so this book was really interesting because it explored the kind of, what if I don't want to find someone, what if that's not for me? I don't know how factual it is, but I know Alice Oseman herself is asexual and aromantic like our main character. This was a 4.25 star read for me. I just really loved this, and I thought it was a really beautiful book. Next up we have another Alex E. Harrow book, and that is 10,000 Doors of January. So this one we follow January, who discovers that she has powers that can take her through doors to different worlds. It's kind of a dual story. We follow both her story and then she is reading her parents' story, so from the past. And I just thought it was really good. Again, it is historical. Alex E. Harrow writes banging historical books. It's obviously fantasy as well. It was a 4-star read to me. I just thought it was really good. The characters are just so well developed and you can't help but get invested. Moving on to our 24th of 25 books, and that is Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. So I read the first book of this earlier in the year, and then I read this one, and I loved this one so much more. It generally is just the most wholesome, warm hug of a book. There were moments in this book where I almost cried just because it was so happy. I'm a very emotional person, so that doesn't surprise me, but at the same time, it was just because it was so happy and so heartwarming that it probably just is. But I gave this 4.5 stars. It is the second book in the Cerulean Sea, so basically it's in a world where magical people are kind of kept watch over, and so it's basically this orphanage. Arthur Parnassus, who is the leader of this orphanage, then Linus Baker, his fiance, they kind of try and adopt the children, and they try and like speak out about how this surveillance of the magical community isn't right. It's an adorable book. This is honestly just a feel-good book that I feel like we all need. And then the 25th book of 2025 is Never by Jessa Hastings. This book and I have beef, because I went into it convinced it was a standalone and was so confused when I get to the end, because the ending, if this is a standalone, the ending is trash, because it doesn't wrap up half of the plot point and it's just an objectively bad ending. You know, it makes no sense. There's no satisfying conclusion. And so I was so mad. It would have been a 5-star read almost, at least a 4.5, and I dropped it to a 3.5 just because the ending. So I went online. There were planned to be more books, but like there's no more announcements than that. So I'm keeping 3.5 stars until I get an official confirm. But this book, it was really interesting. It was my first Jessa Hastings book, but I think she manages to write complex and not necessarily healthy relationships really well. It was really good, and it honestly just made me really excited to read Magnolia Parks, because I thought the toxic relationships in this were really well done and they were really interesting. Also, the main character did piss me off. She was annoying, but I still really liked the book. There you go. That took a long time. 25 books is a lot of books, so obviously it takes a long time talking about them. But those were my 25 books of 2025. It was fun looking back at like my year in reading, because these are books that go from January to literally last month. So it is very representative of my whole year. I think there's probably a book in here from every month. And honestly, I think this year was a really good reading book. I read some really good books, 11 5-stars, so definitely some really good books. And I discovered a lot of new authors. So I hope you enjoyed my little 25 of 2025. If you did, let me know in the comments. Do not forget to like and subscribe. Every subscriber and like is very much appreciated. Yeah, so have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.